This happened about 10 years ago when I was on summer break. I think I was 15 years old. I grew up in a very run-of-the-mill middle-class neighborhood in San Antonio. Our house sat on a corner, and the fence around the backyard had horizontal wood beams that almost made an X, as opposed to a vertical fence post that I am more familiar with. Because of this, there were larger gaps between the beams, and seeing through was fairly easy. Another detail worth noting, our back gate on the side of the house near the road had been wide open many mornings. And because of this, my dad had looped some wire through the latch and twisted it like a bread tie to keep it engaged and close, but we would still find it open. In the backyard, there was a large deck and an above-ground pool that the deck was built up to on one end. A huge, beautiful oak tree shaded the deck and the part of the pool closest to the house. So my sister and I would anchor our feet at the farthest edge, closest to the back corner of the fence, and sunbathe on our floats. This happened on a Sunday. My grandfather was visiting, and he and my parents were inside napping. My older sister is gone with her friends to a different pool, and I decide to go float in the backyard. My mom closes the blinds to the back and habitually locks the back door before laying down on the couch to snooze. I'm in the pool for maybe 20 minutes, and I can see that someone is standing on the other side of the fence looking in. But the sun is shining in my face, so I can't see him well, and find it weird, but don't say anything. I see him walk off, and I don't think much about it. Minutes pass, and I decide to swim around a bit to cool off and get back on the float. This time on my stomach, and my face is looking up at the house instead of towards the fence. It feels like just a minute passes, and I hear the sound of wood creaking. I turn around, and this man is halfway over my back fence and maybe 15 feet away from me once he hits the ground. Part of me was in shock, and I froze for a moment before sheer terror and panic took over. This is not a dream, this is really happening, and I need to get inside now. I felt as though the pool became Olympic-sized, and I could not get off the edge and climb out fast enough. By the time I make it out of the pool and start running to the back door, the man had made his way around it, and is also on the deck coming towards me. He was maybe in his late 20s or early 30s, pretty thin and around my height, 5'9". He just walked the entire time and never spoke. I get to the door and it's locked. I started screaming, let me in, and it's pounding on the door. At least my mom was right there to unlock it, but 30 seconds felt like 10 minutes. And when my mom opened the door, he was just standing right behind me with this blank look in his eyes. I'm crying, and my grandpa's freaking out. And the man is still just standing there looking inside. My dad comes downstairs and goes crazy, screaming at the man and pushes him and tells him to get the hell out. My mom is on the phone with the police at this point, and the next moment makes the whole thing 10 times creepier. The man gets up and walks around the house and over to our back gate, which had the wire in the latch, untwisted it and pushed through, leaving the gate wide open, and walks back across the street and into our neighbor's house. The police arrive, and it turns out the man had been staying with his sister for the past 8 weeks and was on parole / recently released from jail. Theft and assault charges. He also had broken into a different neighbor's home and stolen some porcelain dishes and a few of their family photos. He went back to jail, and we never found our back gate left open again. I still get chills thinking about this because my sister and I both had our bedroom downstairs with our windows facing the backyard, and I just know he was coming in there and watching us at night. My parents moved out of this home a few years later when I went to college, but I slept upstairs on a pull-out couch for months after this, and will never live on a ground floor again if I can help it. This happened about 10 years ago in the south of the UK. For reference, I'm a 28-year-old male, and at the time I was working part-time at a fuel station on an A road that linked a small village to a ring road into the nearby city. The village itself was quiet, high-end, and extremely expensive to live in. It was the sort of place that only had one chain store, and it was a Waitrose. Everything else was either boutiques or privately owned gourmet grocers. So, as someone who has always enjoyed cars, it was always fun to see what kind of high-end luxury sports cars would adorn the forecourt on any given day. This is where I met Michael. Michael was in his late 40s, dark-haired and well-dressed. He always wore Ralph Lauren or, on his work days, tailored Canali suits, etc. He was an all-around nice guy, exceptionally polite, which was actually a rarity, as most of the residents of the surrounding areas seemed to despise anyone who didn't qualify for the additional tax bracket. We got chatting about his collection of vehicles or the watches he wore. He'd always show up wearing some kind of Rolex and driving his Aston Martin, Range Rover, or Porsche, so there was always a lot to talk about. I got to know that he worked in finance, and the conversation got on to what I was planning to do with my life, also to work in finance, and we'd always have these pleasant conversations until I left that part-time job in favor of taking up an apprenticeship role at my uncle's brokerage. Michael is important, and we'll get to why shortly. Something to be known about my uncle is that he's a man with a lot of fingers and a lot of pies, literally. As well as his brokerage and property portfolio, he also owned a few takeaways for cash flow purposes. I think we all know what that means, and as such, I'd occasionally step in as a delivery driver when a driver would let him down. Luckily, my uncle also lived in the previously mentioned village, and the main pizza place he owned catered to the residents of said village. So tips were usually quite decent, and my uncle would usually throw me a few quid for helping out. Fast forward to summer 2008, and I've been roped into dropping off a few pies at a property on an extremely prestigious road. The average house price is well above 1.4 million, and I'm intrigued to actually get close enough to see what these houses actually look like, as they're all gated and set far back from the road behind a shroud of trees and shrubs. So I found the place and buzzed the intercom when a voice comes back, sort of muffled, just saying, "Yes?" So I answer with the name of the takeaway, and the gates slowly open, and I make my way up the driveway to a very large mock Georgian home, complete with a detached 4-car garage, and that's when I see Michael's number plates. He had his initials for his cars with the numbers 2 and 3, and it was the same for his wife. I was interested to see up close the sort of life this guy had. If I'm completely honest, especially as a young aspiring financier. I exited my car and brought out the pizzas, and the double doors opened, and that's when I saw an unfamiliar face looking back at me. It was a man, early 20s maybe, thin and with a shaved head. I can remember he was wearing no shirt and some scruffy jeans and trainers. He was also holding something behind his back. "Hey, bring the pizzas through to the kitchen." I can remember his voice being hoarse and barely audible and with an accent I'd never heard before. Nervously, I said nothing and just looked at him, which made him visibly angry. "Bring the pizza through," he repeated, more aggressive this time, and I finally responded, "Where's Michael? This is Michael's place, right?" And it is completely true that in situations like this, your mouth goes completely dry and to always follow your gut. This guy was setting off alarm bells and telling every fiber of my being to just get off the property. Unfortunately, this is when it dawned upon me that it's a gated property and I was locked in. This is when things went from bad to worse. I can remember the terror swelling up inside of me when he moved his hand in front of him to show me a large kitchen knife and uttered the words, "Run." I dropped the pizza onto the gravel, left my car, and decided I'd have a better chance of survival by running down the driveway and lifting myself over the gates. They were the wooden type, which had no decorative spears atop them, luckily, but all the while I could hear his feet crunching onto the gravel behind me. I didn't look back and managed to pull myself up and over the gates and hurl myself onto the pavement beneath me. The adrenaline in my system still had me running for what seemed like hours, but was perhaps 10 minutes at most, until I was a good few streets away and I decided to call the police. The police met me at the park I was hiding at. One officer stayed with me and the other proceeded to the property, along with another patrol car. At first, I got the distinct impression that they didn't believe me or thought I was up to something. But after my uncle arrived to pick me up and vouch for me being sent there to deliver pizza, the officer in question backed down. Upon their arrival at the property, they found nothing, just my car with slashed tires and broken windows, alongside feces being smeared across part of the kitchen. There was food strewn about the place and also a needle found in one of the bathrooms, but no sign of the man who threatened me. Michael and his family at the time were visiting family in Australia, I later found out. I never did go back for another shift at the pizza place, and although I understand this may not be the craziest or most horrifying encounter, It's something that's always stuck with me. Wealth and apparent financial security are just completely illusory. People are people, and there are some sick and tormented people out there who will always find a way to carry out their twisted actions, and if anything, I've had more encounters with crazy people since moving away from my council estate roots and into suburbia. This sad, terrible story took place in the year 2003, when I was a 15-year-old girl still living in my home country of Uruguay. My best friend at the time, the same age as me, was my neighbor who lived with her mother and grandmother 3 houses down from mine. We had been friends since we were babies. We grew up together, went to the same school, and we were in the same social circle. Went on vacation together and shared clothes, CDs, and food. We were basically sisters. Our families were very close. Her mom, in her early 30s at the time, was a single mom working as a secretary. They didn't have it bad. Between her salary and the grandmother's pension, they lived comfortably and without any major setbacks. Her mom started seeing a foreign guy who was in the country for business. He claimed to be from Spain, but he had a funny accent, as if he were originally from Italy or another non-Spanish speaking country. He was supposedly rich, despite staying in a rinky-dinky hotel. The hotel did have a pool though, lol. He would often show pictures of himself in a very luxurious residence. He said it was his house in Ibiza. Pictures of him driving a red sports car, picture of him in front of the Eiffel Tower, and so on. After a month and a half or so of dating, my friend's mom said they were leaving the country in perhaps the next 7 months. She was in love with him and he had promised her a life of luxury in Europe. And everything was going to be perfect in the country they were moving to. Spain. She and her daughter. The grandma couldn't come. At least not yet. She was supposed to meet them in the future after they had settled in, but at the same time, wasn't he rich? So many red flags. This is where I come in, since I was such good friends with Maritza. The guy had told Maritza's mom to bring me along for vacation, that it would be good for Maritza, make the transition easier, etc. I was, of course, thrilled. A month in Europe with my best friend who was moving away, and the idea of going to see her every summer and staying at her stepfather's mansion, it was a dream. My parents, of course, weren't so thrilled at first, but as they got to know him, they liked him, and eventually he won them over too. Eventually, I even got a little weekend job as a waitress at my uncle's restaurant to help my parents with the plane ticket and other costs. We got my passport. We were ready to go. As the months went by, it became evident that I wasn't going to be able to go. The money I had saved wasn't enough. It didn't even cover half of the ticket, and my parents couldn't come up with the money for the rest of the trip. A week or so before they left, the guy came to my house and talked to my parents. He offered to pay for my plane ticket. My parents politely declined. I was fuming. I swore I would never talk to my parents again. I didn't come out of my room for days. Eventually I got over it, and when it was time to go to the airport to say goodbye to them, I did. We cried, we hugged, and we promised each other we would meet up next summer. By then, I would have already had the money saved. They left. We never heard from them again. The days went by and nothing. I remember the grandmother, the pain on her face, the night she went on without sleeping. Home alone without her daughter and granddaughter who were supposed to call her as soon as they arrived in Spain, and yet they never did. Eventually, they were reported as missing. Surprisingly enough, the guy had given out his real name and last name the whole time, so after the cops got involved, turns out he had this huge record in Spain and Italy, and had been in jail for drugs, prostitution, kidnapping, extortion, God knows what else. The police told their family that they were most likely sold into a human trafficking ring, that this was very common, and that sadly, there were too many cases like it. There was nothing to do but wait. The last time anyone saw them or had any record of them was at the airport in Seville when they arrived. Nothing else. It breaks my heart even to this day, and to think that if my parents had said yes, I wouldn't be here today. Sends chills down my spine. Sometimes I look Maritza up on Facebook in hopes that I'll find her. Maybe she regained her life and her freedom, but nothing ever shows up. The grandmother died in 2013 too. Sadly, without ever seeing or hearing about her daughter and granddaughter again.